Companies of all types and sizes rely on user experience designers to help make their technology easier and more enjoyable to use. The demand for user experience designers is so high that a lot of companies can't fill their job openings. Luckily, there are lots of people like you who are excited to enter the field of user experience design, also known as UX design. And here's the good news. UX designers come from all kinds of backgrounds and experiences. Lots of UX jobs don't require a specific work history or a college degree. In fact, some UX professionals have taught themselves the skills needed to land their first job. That's where this program comes in. Through these courses, you'll gain the foundational skills, hands-on experience, and confidence you'll need to become a UX designer. This program is for anyone who wants to find a job in UX design. And when you complete this program, you'll have the opportunity to share your information with top employers like Google that are interested in hiring entry-level UX designers. So, welcome to Google's Certificate in User Experience Design. We're so excited you're here. This program is split into 7 courses, with each course concentrating on a different part of UX design, from explaining the basics of UX design to designing your first prototype. Be sure to take the courses in order so you can build on your knowledge and skills as you go with every new assignment. Each of the 7 courses is broken down into weeks, and each week includes videos, readings, hands-on activities, discussion prompts, and quizzes. Whether or not you complete the material in a week is up to you. You have the flexibility to go at your own pace. Throughout this program, you'll learn how to conduct research, draw a wireframe, and create your own designs using tools like Figma and Adobe XD. You'll also complete 3 unique projects to demonstrate what you've learned and to earn your completion certificate. When you're finished, you'll have a portfolio of work, a polished resume, and interview skills to support you as you apply for jobs as a UX designer. Whether you've been experimenting in UX design for years, or you're completely new to the field, you can complete this program. Everything is entirely self-paced, which means you decide how much you want to do each week. Along the way, you'll learn from other Google employees or Googlers, each with their own unique perspectives and backgrounds. We'll share how we became UX designers, give professional tips, and provide you with a glimpse into our day-to-day work. Keep in mind, depending on where you work, your UX role might be general or specialized. Your responsibilities could vary widely from role to role. And so could the members of your team. We'll cover all that in more depth as we go. Because Googlers created this program, you'll learn the most practical information needed to launch your own UX design career. So let's meet your instructors. My name is Michael, and I'm an interaction designer in the Privacy and Data Protection Office at Google. I'll be your instructor for this course, where we'll cover the most fundamental principles of user experience design. I'm super excited to guide you through the first part of the program. Now I'll let the rest of the instructors introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm a senior UX researcher for Google Assistant. I'll be your instructor for user research, empathize, define, and ideate, which is about understanding your user and the design problem you're trying to solve.
My name is Karen, and I'm thrilled to lead you in this next part of your UX design journey. I'm an interaction designer on the material design team at Google. We'll soon be creating storyboards, wireframes, and low-fidelity prototypes.
I'm Jason, the head of equity engineering at Google. I'm your instructor for Course 4, where we'll use your newly acquired research knowledge to conduct studies and test those early ideas.
Hi, I'm Kunal, a UX designer for the material design team. I'll be instructor for Course 5, where we'll cover how to create mockups and high-fidelity prototypes in Figma, a digital design program.
I'm Dave, and I'm a UX manager on Google Maps. I'll introduce you to Adobe XD, which is a design tool you'll use to create the second project for your portfolio. I'll be there to guide you through each step as you design a responsive website.
Hey, I'm Paolo, and I'm the Director of UX for YouTube Ads. I'll be your instructor for Course 7, where you'll create a third portfolio project and build a portfolio that's ready for the job market.
And I'm Shabby, an interaction designer for the Central Accessibility Organization. I'll be stopping by throughout the program to show you how accessible and inclusive design should be included in every step of the design process.
So you've met your instructors and heard a bit more about what you'll learn in this program. Coming up, we'll explore the field of user experience in more depth so you can decide if you want to pursue a career as a UX designer. Are you excited? Let's get started. Welcome to your first course. Anyone interested in UX design can complete this course because you don't need any previous experience in design and you don't need a college degree. In this first video, we'll cover the goals of the course and the history of UX design. UX designers help make technology easier to understand and more enjoyable to use. So when did the study of user experience, or UX, begin? Let's learn some quick history to get us up to speed. The phrase user experience was first coined in the 1990s by cognitive psychologist Don Norman as technology use expanded and evolved. Although the term came about relatively recently, the principles of user experience actually stretch back thousands of years, all the way to ancient China, where the practice of feng shui began. Practitioners believed that the arrangement of a physical space, like how furniture is positioned in a room, could bring someone luck or improve their health and happiness. Today, lots of different industries still rely on these same basic ideas. In the tech world, user experience mostly focuses on how people use or interact with products. In this course, we'll explore the foundations of UX design and why it's so important for consumers and businesses. We'll learn common terms, tools, and frameworks that UX designers use. We'll discuss how to plan and participate in design sprints, a common method for collaborating on projects. And finally, you'll begin to build your professional presence online, including starting your portfolio. To help keep track of what you're learning, you'll take practice quizzes and complete peer reviews and self-reviews. You'll get plenty of chances to go over the materials in practice. At the end of the week, you'll wrap up the course with a graded assessment to show what you know. So let's start at the beginning and learn the basics of user experience design. I started off my career in animation, and I worked in the industry for a number of years. And at one point, when I saw the internet really maturing and I saw all the opportunities online, I started to realize that there was a bigger canvas there where I could display my work. So I felt that I could pivot to UX design and use some of my interaction design skills that I inherited from that industry to help me in my career in UX design. One of my first jobs in UX was working at a startup. And it was a really great opportunity because I had the chance to work through the whole UX pipeline, all the way from doing research all the way to launching the product. So I had the opportunity to wear a lot of hats, and I got to work with a lot of different people outside of my UX field, like engineers and project managers and things like that. So it was a really great opportunity to try all these different things and also just to learn the craft of UX in a very deep way. And at that time, I was the only UX designer at the company, so I was also doing branding and marketing and iconography and basically everything you can think of under the sun. I came in knowing some of the skills that I needed, but I actually learned quite a bit on the job. Just from working and collaborating with other people, I learned the process along the way. The more websites or the more products that got shipped, is the more I learned about the process and the more I started feeling more comfortable. It was really exciting to see a product finally launch that we've been working on for so long. And it was also really rewarding to get feedback from users about what they thought of the product that I've designed. So I'm super excited about this certificate because of all the opportunities it's going to give people around the world. When I first got started in UX, there weren't a lot of opportunities available for resources to get started. So I feel that this certificate really will help everyone, regardless of what your background is, regardless of whether you have a background in UX design or visual design or anything. you can get started with a certificate and you can get a really great foundation and get the UX design job of your dreams. Hi, my name is Michael, and I'm a UX designer at Google. Hi again. Earlier we discussed how UX designers help make technology easier to understand and more enjoyable to use. In this video, we'll define user experience and UX design. We'll review why UX design is important for consumers and businesses. Let's get started. The user experience is how a person, the user, feels about interacting with or experiencing a product. And a product is a good, service, or feature. It might be a physical product, like a video game controller, or a bag of potato chips, or a technology product, like an app, website, or smartwatch. There are many things that can make up a good user experience. In this video, we'll highlight some of them. For example, for a user to have a good experience, the product needs to be usable, equitable, enjoyable, and useful. Let's break that down. To begin, user experience is about improving usability, or making something easier to use. This means that the design, structure, and purpose of the product are clear to everyone. Think about a ketchup bottle. Historically, ketchup came in a glass bottle. The user had to hit the bottom of the glass to make ketchup come out. Often, no ketchup or too much ketchup would come out of the bottle. Today, the ketchup bottle has been redesigned into a plastic, squeezable bottle, which makes it easier to use and allows users to control how much ketchup comes out. UX designers need to think about every person who uses the product. This might include people with disabilities or people with very different life experiences from your own. For example, one user might find an app with a lot of text easy to use. On the other hand, a user with a visual impairment might want different features, like sound. Considering the unique needs of many different people is important work, and thinking about equitable design is key. Being equitable means your designs are useful and marketable to people with diverse abilities and backgrounds. User experience is also about making things enjoyable to use, which creates a positive connection between the user and the product. UX designers foster that positive connection by taking a user's thoughts and feelings into account when making products. Think about ordering takeout food online. When you search for a restaurant in Google or Yelp, you can see photos of dishes and read reviews from other people who have eaten there. This experience is enjoyable because you can make a more informed choice about what to order, leaving you feeling happier about the product. So, how do we figure out what makes a user happy with the product? That's where research comes in. To know how users feel, we have to collect evidence on how they're experiencing that product in real time, and ask them about it too. We'll discuss this in a lot more detail later. As humans, we want products that are useful, meaning they solve our problems. For example, if you're lost, a map app telling you how to get home is useful. But if the app can't find your current location, it's not so useful anymore. So now we know what it means for a user to have a good experience. Why is it important to business? In 2018, the research firm McKinsey & Company studied companies in 3 industries: medical technology, consumer goods, and retail banking. They found that, regardless of industry, businesses that focused on good usability and design performed better than their competitors. Basically, it comes down to this. When people like a product, they use that product a lot, and they recommend it to their friends. And more people using the product means better business for the company. Plus, when users have a good experience with the product, they're more likely to have a positive opinion of the company that made it. A win-win for the user and the business. Can you think of a product you love so much that you shared it with a friend? If you did, that's a great example of user experience design in action. Despite all this, a lot of companies don't understand the important role that UX design can play in improving their business. And that's where you, as a UX designer, come in. So now you know how to describe user experience and UX design, and you understand why UX design is important for consumers and businesses. Next up, we'll learn more about what UX designers do. Okay, so we've covered the basics of what user experience design is and why it's important. Now, let's discuss different roles within UX design and colleagues you might work with. UX designers come from a lot of different backgrounds: marketers, artists, teachers, small business owners, cashiers, or anything really. Rather than sharing similar work histories, UX designers tend to share common skills and interests instead. A lot of UX designers have a good sense for visuals, which means you recognize when an image fits or doesn't fit in a space, or what colors complement each other. But you don't need to know anything about graphic design or even be able to draw to be a UX designer. UX designers tend to be curious about people and like thinking about how people's minds work. They also enjoy figuring out how people use products and how to make those products easier to use. UX designers are empathetic too. Empathy is the ability to understand someone else's feelings or thoughts in a situation, and it's a major part of UX. Remember earlier when we mentioned equitable design and designing for everyone? Well, in order to design for everyone, we need to understand how a person might feel or what they might think in any situation. Just like a lot of UX designers don't share work histories, they don't always share educational backgrounds either. A lot of UX designers learn on their own by taking courses like this one and teaching themselves the skills they need to get entry-level jobs. They're pretty resourceful too, tapping their experience from other jobs or hobbies to build a foundation for their new careers. So, we've covered common characteristics of people drawn to UX design. Now let's explore what those UX designers actually do. When you think of the word design, you might think it's all about the visual aspects of a product. But it's only one small part of what the UX designers might do. In fact, there are many different kinds of UX designers: interaction designers, visual designers, and motion designers. Let's start with interaction designers, who focus on designing the experience of a product and how it functions. They figure out how to connect the user's needs and the business's goals with what's actually feasible to build. As an interaction designer at Google, my team and I are responsible for defining the user experience for security and privacy-related tools. In my world, users always come first. There are also visual designers who focus on how a product or technology looks. They might be responsible for designing logos, illustration, or icons. They might also decide font color and size or work on product layouts. Motion designers are another common type of UX designer. They think about what it feels like for a user to move through a product and how to create smooth transitions between pages on an app or a website. Similar to UX designers, there are also graphic designers who create visuals that tell a story or message. Graphic designers usually work on the appearance of a physical product, like an invitation or a poster, while UX designers focus on how users interact with a product. Outside of design, there are many other roles in the field of UX. Collaboration is an important part of a UX designer's job. So let's talk about a few of the most common colleagues a designer might work with. UX researchers conduct the studies or interviews that help us learn how people use a product. Then, there are UX writers who think about how to make the language within a product clearer to make the user experience more intuitive. This could include writing labels for buttons or adjusting the tone to be formal or friendly. Next up, we have production designers, who often act as a bridge between interaction designers and engineers. They make sure the first and final designs match in the finished product materials and that the assets are ready to be handed off to the engineering team. The assets are everything from text and images to the design specifications like font style, color, size, and spacing. Which brings us to the UX engineers, one of the groups that UX designers work with most frequently. UX engineers translate the design's intent into a functioning experience like a website or an app. And finally, UX program managers ensure clear and timely communication so that the process of building a useful product moves smoothly from start to finish. This might include setting up goals and writing project plans. In this video, we've explored different types of UX design roles you might pursue and introduce you to other colleagues you might work with. Coming up, we'll talk about how to create a good user experience through design. Welcome back. As you learn more about UX design, you might start noticing functionalities in phone apps or store layouts that you've never considered before. Have you ever created an account on an app and had no idea what to do next? Or have you pressed a button only to find out that what you thought was going to happen didn't? Predicting user roadblocks and potential design mishaps is what good UX design is all about. In this video, we'll explain what makes a user experience design good or poor. It might seem like a good design is based on personal preference, but most designs that are considered poor or unpleasant for the user don't reflect the user's needs. Think about a product as simple as a door. Have you ever tried to leave a room, pull the door handle, but the door didn't budge? That's because you were supposed to push the door handle, not pull it. As designers, we have to think about how to improve the user experience with the door so that we can easily exit and enter. Doors with this kind of poor user experience are called Norman doors. Remember Don Norman, who invented the term UX? In his book, The Design of Everyday Things, he first describes this phenomenon, and he explains how a user's experience isn't always considered in a product design. All right, so doors are just one example of user experience. Let's think about UX design in technology. Well-designed apps aim to save space on the screen by using icons instead of text, so more information can fit. Icons are also pleasing to look at and easy to understand, no matter the user's native language, but sometimes the meaning of an icon is impossible to figure out unless you tap on it. In that case, text would be a lot more useful. Good design considers the user's needs. For the user to have a good experience, the product needs to be usable, equitable, enjoyable, and useful, among other things. For example, the purpose of a shopping app is to buy things. If you put a pair of shoes in your virtual shopping cart, you expect to be able to buy them. But if you add the shoes to your shopping cart and are then told they are out of stock, that is not a good user experience. And good user experiences should create products that are intuitive and easy to use. Each product should be designed to make the user feel a certain way. A key task for UX designers is to tie a specific emotion to the experience of using the product. So, start paying attention to the things you use every day, the direction you have to turn the faucets in your bathtub, the way your baby's pajamas button, what error messages on your phone mean, and which way to open doors. You start to recognize both positive and negative aspects in each of their designs. Use your own experiences to think about what makes a design good or poor. What could be made better? What's already working? We're going to continue exploring these ideas during the rest of this course and for the entire program. Exciting, right? So far, we've explored the different types of UX designers. Over the course of this program, you'll become much more familiar with the most important tasks that UX designers do. You might even be drawn to a particular path or specialty. To get started, let's identify some typical responsibilities of entry-level UX designers: researching, wireframing, prototyping, creating information architecture, and communicating effectively. Entry-level UX designers start their careers by doing a lot of tasks to learn the basics. One of those tasks might be research. UX designers use research to understand audiences and learn about their backgrounds, demographics like age and location, motivations, pain points, emotions, and life goals. There's a lot to learn about users and their preferences, and UX designers want to discover as much as they can in order to inform their product's design. An entry-level designer also creates wireframes. A wireframe is an outline or a sketch of a product or a screen. It helps the designer figure out how a page is arranged, where each piece of a product fits in with the others, and how users will likely interact with the product. Wireframing is one of the first steps designers take when building a new product or feature. It's done after or at the same time as the research. We can wireframe by drawing on paper or digitally on a computer. Here are some examples of wireframes I've done. This is for a web page on Google's transparency report. Notice that they're just basic drawings, but you can tell what goes where. These wireframes were designed to demonstrate the basic structure of the page to gain support from key stakeholders, people with a business interest in the final product. A UX designer will also create prototypes. A prototype is an early model of a product that demonstrates functionality like a wireframe, but a lot more advanced. While a wireframe gives you a general idea of where things go and how the product will function, a prototype illustrates a progression from one screen to the next. We can draw prototypes on paper, create a physical prototype, or build a digital prototype. Here's a prototype for Google's transparency report that I created. And here's the final version. The purpose of wireframes and prototypes is to figure out the best design for a product, inexpensively and quickly. Another responsibility of an entry-level UX designer might include creating the information architecture, which is the framework of a website or how it's organized, categorized, and structured. For example, when you click the File menu on a word processing application like Google Docs, you expect certain options like New or Print to appear in the drop-down menu. Or when you click on a company's homepage, you expect to find a link to an About page. That structure is the website's information architecture. Finally, an entry-level UX design job, like many jobs, also requires a lot of communication, like meetings with colleagues, writing emails, creating proposals, or pitching clients. So in short, entry-level UX designers should know how to research, wireframe, prototype, create information architecture, and communicate effectively. Your exact responsibilities will vary depending on where you work and how specialized you need to be for your particular job. Up next, you'll learn about being a generalist or a specialist and what that means for your career options. Intrigued? Let's go.
My name is Dane, and I'm a visual designer at Google. The life of a UX designer at Google is pretty interesting and really fun. So when you're working on a product, you'll either be drafting up a new solution or a new feature of that product, or you'll be building upon something that already exists and finding a way to improve it. You'll start by identifying the problems. What are the issues going on within this product, and why are we even looking to improve or introduce this feature? And once you start to find those problems, you'll start to realize what the solution is and why it needs to be done a certain way. You chat with other people on your team to see what solutions could be feasible, and you get to work. You're going to be interacting with everybody on your team. There are other visual designers that you can chat with. There are researchers that can tell you what has been decided in the past and what hasn't been explored yet. There's also interaction designers who can tell you, oh, well, this page should move in this way, or this should happen as soon as you tap this button. This is an opportunity to get the feedback that you really need to be able to push your project to success. Once you go into a UX critique session, you'll present that to the team, and that's when you'll start to get really high-level feedback as to how the interaction should change or how it can be improved for the success of the product. When you're a full-time UX designer, you're going to expect a lot of critiques, a lot of UX critiques that help contribute to the success of the product. And what's really important is to remember that it never has anything to do with you as the designer. It just has to do with the solution and how we can collectively make sure it's the best that it could possibly be. And as soon as you come to a solution, that's when you go in and you chat with the higher-ups and the leads to see if this is a solution that's ready to be implemented. And once you get the pass for it to be implemented, you then start passing it on to engineers who will be able to build out your solution, and then you get to see it come to life. As a visual designer, being able to create something that's going to impact other people every single day And because I'm focusing on the front-facing visuals, it's our job to determine how this is going to look and how it's going to work for people. And I think having that impact and having that role is pretty important and pretty meaningful as a UX designer.
Hi again. So far, we've learned about some of the tasks an entry-level UX designer might do each day. We've also mentioned that your role might differ depending on where you work. In this video, we'll explain the differences between generalist, specialist, and T-shaped roles in UX design. A generalist is a UX designer with a broad number of responsibilities. Most UX designers begin their careers this way, doing various tasks. For example, you might do a bit of interaction design work, a bit of visual design work, and more. One benefit of being a generalist is that you get to try out roles and find a specialty that you're passionate about. Generalist UX designers are common at smaller companies with fewer employees, as these companies don't have big design departments, so you might have to wear many hats. A generalist might be responsible for a combination of user research, branding, user flows, UX writing, visual design, prototyping, production design, information architecture, and usability testing, among other things. Most generalists start their roles knowing about one or two of these topics. They learn about other areas on the job from their colleagues or mentors. UX generalists can also continue their education through professional development, doing their own research to keep up with industry trends and participating in online UX communities to learn from other designers. On the other hand, if you become really interested in one part of UX design, you might find your niche as a specialist. A specialist dives deep into one particular UX design role, like interaction, visual, or motion design. While a generalist has a breadth of knowledge, a specialist has more depth of knowledge in one kind of UX design. Specialists usually work at large companies where the organization can afford to have a big team of UX designers. At Google, we have thousands of specialized UX designers. Take me, for example. I specialize in interaction design. We covered some specialist tracks earlier in the course. If you need a refresher, check out the glossary. As you advance in your career, you may become a T-shaped designer. A T-shaped designer specializes in one kind of UX design and has a breadth of knowledge in other areas. This is called a T-shaped designer because your skills look like an uppercase T. The vertical line of the T is the kind of UX design you specialize in, like visual design. The horizontal line across the top of the T includes your complementary skills. These skills might come from other fields like interaction design that cross over with your specialties or soft skills that help you work more effectively. Becoming a specialist or generalist isn't always a conscious choice. It might be based entirely on where you work and what skills are needed. When I started in UX design, I was a motion graphics designer. Then I worked on video games, apps for businesses, and apps about financial technology. Now that I work at Google, I focus on privacy as an interaction designer. The more experience you get in the industry, the broader your perspective. You'll be exposed to a lot of different companies, design principles, and work styles, and you'll learn how each one can better inform your designs. As a UX designer, there's always room to grow and opportunities for change. So whether you become a generalist or a specialist, there are plenty of options.
My name is Erica, and I'm a senior visual designer. A visual designer is someone who uses iconography, typography, color, space, and textures in their products to create consistent and accessible design patterns. For example, if you were to look at an app, pretty much anything you see on the surface, the buttons, the colors, the typography, the white space around all of those elements is what a visual designer would be responsible for. During my last year of college, I worked at a web design and development agency where I got a ton of experience with graphic design and actually UX design before I even knew what that was. From there, I went to work at a startup called Waze before they were acquired by Google. And there I was hired just as a general designer, where I worked on things like our website, our app, designing little icons, illustration, research. I was considered a generalist, and I worked on a lot of different design roles. From there, we were acquired by Google, and so my role became a little bit more formalized, and I was technically a UI designer, but I still was a generalist, and I worked a lot on marketing design, the app UX, and as well as a lot of web design for things like dashboards and analytics. I kind of branched out to the visual design path at Google, and that's what I've been ever since for the last few years. As a generalist designer, you work on a bunch of different things, from interaction design and visual design to user research. This would typically happen at maybe a startup or an agency where you work on a variety of different projects, and your responsibility depends on whatever hat you need to wear that day. Some of the benefits of being a generalist designer are that you can learn a ton, and oftentimes this will be in like a fast-paced environment, so you don't really have time to stop and really go deep into any of these roles. Rather, you just learn by doing, and it's a really quick and effective way of seeing what all the possibilities are within UX. At bigger companies, there are specialist designers. For instance, at Google, there are interaction designers, visual designers, UX engineers, UX writers, and UX researchers. For these roles, the expectations are a little bit more clear for you. So you'll be evaluated based on what work you're doing specifically within a product. So a UX writer will be responsible for all of the copy and all of the strings throughout any product you might see. And they are, within their team, known to be the expert in their field. The benefits of being a specialist are that the expectations are very clear for what your role is, and there are a ton of resources that you can continue to just develop your expertise. And what I like about being a specialist is that I know that anyone on my team trusts and knows my work and can come to me with any of their visual design problems. Having been both a generalist and a specialist, I've really, really enjoyed both. And especially earlier on in my career, being a generalist, it was a really good way for me to ramp up on all things UX. I got to work on such a variety of projects, and it really, really helped me hone my craft. Once I had been in the UX space for a while, I realized that I really was kind of more drawn to visual design challenges, and that's what kind of led me along the visual design path. And so now, being a specialist, it feels good to know that you're kind of an expert in your field. And so I can definitely see the benefits in both being a generalist and a specialist, and maybe more so being a generalist when you're first starting out.
So far, you've learned about common responsibilities of UX designers and the types of roles that UX designers might have. But, like many people, UX designers don't work alone. They work on cross-functional teams that might include other designers, engineers, researchers, product leads, or program managers. In this video, we'll discuss how these cross-functional teams work together to build a product. Imagine you're working on an app for ordering food. You and your team want to build a new feature that shows users restaurants that offer allergen-free meals. The product lead decides the scope of the project. The UX researcher tries to understand user trust, like whether users will trust the information about allergens or trust the app itself. The interaction designer figures out the flow for ordering, like how to include allergen-free foods in the search filter. The visual designer thinks about how to make it easy for users to find allergen-free foods in the product. These UX designers create wireframes and prototypes to show the experience that users will have in the app. The engineers bring these wireframes and prototypes to life and create ways for restaurants to each add information about their allergen-free options. As you might have noticed, it's important for UX designers to collaborate with engineers because engineers build the final product. This collaboration happens throughout the entire process. There are multiple opportunities for UX designers and engineers to provide feedback to each other to make their changes together. There are a lot of moving parts here. This is where the program manager comes in, to ensure clear and timely communication across the team, so the process of building useful apps moves smoothly from start to finish. Every team and team member has a different task to complete, but ultimately, they all have the same goal: to build a product that's usable, useful, equitable, and enjoyable for users and businesses. Coming up, we'll discuss the types of companies UX designers work at. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how many options you have. Welcome back. So far, we've discussed why user experience is important, the job responsibilities of a UX designer, and the teams that UX designers often work with. Now we're going to explain the types of companies you could work at as a UX designer, and how your job may differ depending on that company's size and industry. Say you're hired by a startup or a small business. First, what's a startup? Well, in simple terms, a startup is a new business that wants to develop a unique product or service and bring it to market. Startups generally have tight budgets and few employees, so each person has to perform a variety of jobs and move quickly. If you're a UX designer at a startup or other small businesses, you'll likely be a generalist. Designers at companies with fewer employees get involved in many parts of the business. You might be responsible for both interaction and visual design, conduct user research, or even help with marketing. Talk about having a lot of jobs to do. Working at a startup or small business can be stressful, but also very rewarding. You'll learn quickly, so it can be a great way to launch your career. Another job a lot of UX designers start out in is freelance. Freelancers work for themselves and market their services to businesses to find customers. As a freelancer, you get to pick projects that interest you, make your own schedule, and work with a lot of different brands. Another common place UX designers work is at advertising agencies. Advertising agencies are teams of creatives hired by clients to build marketing campaigns. For example, a beverage company might hire an ad agency to create a campaign for a new soda. As a UX designer, you might be responsible for developing wireframes and designs for digital products for the new campaign. You may also do work that's outside of the usual UX design tasks, like graphic design or writing. Working at an ad agency is a lot like freelancing in that you get to work with a bunch of different brands, but you'll be employed by the agency instead of being self-employed, and you'll be part of a team. Design agencies and design studios are another option for jobs. A design agency provides a one-stop shop for the look of brands, products, and services. They're usually more specialized than ad agencies because they focus on design and branding. Your average day working at a design agency is a lot like working at a startup. You'll probably be a generalist and the only designer on the project. You'll be exposed to a lot of different industries and get to solve unique problems. But since design agencies work with multiple clients, you might not work on a project from beginning to end. UX designers at design agencies regularly move between teams and work on different stages of a product's development. Finally, you can work as a UX designer at a big company like Google. Big companies have thousands of employees working on lots of different projects. UX designers are typically specialized in their work and focus on one project from beginning to end. Working at a big company is a great way to learn about a specialization within UX design. Plus, you get to learn from other experts. One trade-off is that you might have fewer options to gain skills outside of your specific role, so a desire to specialize is key. Now that you know what's out there, which types of companies are you most excited about working at? If you're inspired, share it with other learners in the discussion forum. You're making awesome progress. You've learned all about the UX design industry and explored where you might work. Now, let's talk about common career paths for UX designers and the kinds of jobs you'll be qualified for after you complete this program. An internship is a great way to start your career. An internship is usually a short-term job with limited responsibility. You often work closely with a supervisor to learn more about a job or industry that you are interning in. It's a fantastic way to get real job experience. Plus, an internship might lead to a full-time job in the future. Another way to start your career is an apprenticeship. Apprenticeships provide on-the-job training to help you develop real skills. Apprenticeships are similar to internships because you work closely with an experienced professional. However, apprenticeships generally last longer than internships, around 1 or 2 years instead of a few months, and apprenticeships are always paid. You could also explore freelancing, which we discussed earlier. You may recall, freelancers work for themselves and market their services to businesses to find customers. Working as a freelancer can help you gain experience on real UX design projects. A good way to get started as a freelancer is to offer your services to a small business or a nonprofit in exchange for a good recommendation and a project to include in your portfolio. Once you have a couple of projects under your belt and some references, you can begin charging customers. If you're excited to explore freelancing, we'll discuss it more in detail at the end of this program. The most common way to start your career in UX design is an entry-level job. Entry-level jobs are roles that do not require prior experience in the field. The skills and portfolio pieces you'll develop in this program will help you get started as an entry-level UX designer. Plenty of companies might be interested in hiring someone who's completed this program and produced a portfolio of outstanding work, someone like you. A job that says it requires a year of experience might instead accept your certificate and portfolio as proof that you have the skills for the job. It clearly communicates your value, so don't limit yourself.
Hi, my name is Juan. I'm a visual designer at Google, and I'm from Dominican Republic, especially from a small town in DR where I don't have access to internet. My passion for computer and internet was very, very high, that every day after school, when I get home, I take my CPU and put it in my head and walk more or less 1 mile to connect to this small lab, because this was the only location in my town where I can get access to internet. And the first thing that I do when I went to the lab was open googlesearch.com and just find tutorial about how to use Photoshop, how to use the software that people in that time used for design. And I remember that was very fun to me. I'm an immigrant. I remember I moved to United States like 10 years ago, and I can find job in design because first, struggle, I can speak English. Even now, probably you need to use subtitles to understand me well, because even now I can speak English very well, but I try. As immigrants, when we came from our country to United States, the first idea that we have in mind is just apply in fast food. I remember back 10 years ago, when I moved to Connecticut, I went to multiple fast food places and I never get a job. And my first job experience in the United States was cleaning toilet in a hotel. I really loved that job. I never imagined that years later, I'm gonna start my first career in design. How I get from working from a hotel, doing housekeeping work, into Google is interesting. It's a crazy and interesting journey. I apply in others design in a studio, and I learned a lot doing draft or rough design for digital agencies. And after a couple of years working on the industry, I just studied by myself using Google search to find how you Photoshop, how you internet, how you freehand, and all the design software. And after that, I remember that a friend suggested me like, hey, I think you should work for Google. You have the potential to work for Google. But at that time, I don't believe that I can work for Google because I never went to college. All the design thing that I know, I learned by myself. She recommended me. I didn't get the job. I didn't pass the second call from the interview process. Year later, the recruiter contacted me and because they think that I could be a good fit for the company. I received an email, hello from Google. And that was really interesting because in the beginning, I thought that was a spam. But I decided to open because I'm curious. And when I read the email where the recruiter say, hey, we believe that now you could be a good fit for the company and we want to have a call with you. Are you still want to work for Google? Of course, I was very nervous. I can't believe that I was reading that email. that Google want to have a call with me. I feel very important. And of course, after 10 minutes, after take a deeper breath, I decide to answer the email. And I answered, and the recruiter was very humble. They made me feel important. They was very friendly with me. And this kind of interaction made me feel more confident. Then I moved to the second step of the interview with a visual designer, where that person was asking me questions about how I design, what is my design process. They try to understand how I work. And the next step was go to the office and have an interview in person with 8 people. That was very intimidating to me. Again, especially that I don't speak English, but I prepare myself. I have a problem with my language, but I know that I was good in my design. I feel confident with that. And what I did amazing presentation with a lot of interaction because I want to show them all my potential. And then I received the call that they want to hire me. I really like to share this because sometimes we don't believe that we can go far. And me, that I came from a village or a small town in the Caribbean without internet access and now working for Google is something that made me feel proud.
My name is Mike, and I'm a design manager at Google. Growing up, I always had a computer in the house, and mostly we would play games and things like that, but we learned to be comfortable with a PC early on. When I was in high school, I was in a drafting class, and we used computers to draw. I spent a lot of extra time learning from the teacher outside of class hours, playing on the computer. So around that time, I moved from the Northeast. I was just outside of Philadelphia in South Jersey. So I moved to the South in North Carolina. And there was a lot of culture shock for me and also sort of a disconnect of parents. There was a lot of autonomy or sort of freedom in a lot of ways. So I ended up dropping out of high school just for a number of those discomforts and kind of wandered off on a different path for a while. I did a number of different things. I worked at car washes. I worked at restaurants. I did network cabling. I installed network cabling in offices and buildings. Eventually, I bought a computer a few years later and started tinkering again. So I started learning the tools to create a website for my dad's company. So now I had a kind of a client. And I just learned. I just kept learning one thing after the other. I'd build it, design it, publish it. And then I started wanting to make it do more. And I wanted it to have some functionality. So I started learning simple scripting, and it just kind of continued to evolve from there. In the beginning, you're learning things so quickly, and there's just like this excitement that comes with everything that you figure out that works. And in one day, you could figure out how to do a layout and manipulate colors and fonts, and each one of those is like a little win. It's just like a little boost that keeps you going for the next thing. And eventually they get harder and harder, and soon enough you're building fairly complex systems. I definitely struggle with imposter syndrome even to this day, and I've been in my career for 25 years. Sometimes it's just struggling to figure something out and then just starting to fall into the pit of thinking I just can't do it, and then I just drive myself forward, just kind of a work ethic approach. Persistence was a lot of it, and also not being afraid to ask others or to look for other inputs and resources. You can't do and solve everything by yourself. Knowing when you're stuck and maybe why you're stuck, and thinking of creative ways to get unstuck, that really helps with imposter syndrome. And that's true today. The nature of my work isn't as technical as before. When I run up against something I haven't dealt with before, I don't feel like I'm the most informed person in the room. I listen or ask questions. I try to find other resources to become more informed.
Okay, we've sure covered a lot this week. Let's quickly recap what you've learned. We've explored how this program works, the definition of UX design, why UX design is important for consumers and businesses, the different roles within the field of UX, what makes a user experience good or poor, an entry-level UX designer's job responsibilities, how a UX designer works with cross-functional teams, differences in UX design jobs, depending on company size and industry, and how to pursue a career in UX design. We've got a lot more exciting topics to come. As you continue through the program, think about the type of job you might be interested in pursuing when you're done. Every new thing you learn here takes you closer to your first role in UX design and closer to landing your dream job. Up next, we'll explore common concepts, tools, and frameworks that UX designers need to know to excel in their careers. Keep up the great work.